Blood was running under a torn black leather vest, disappearing into the pale dust of a desert wash. The man wearing it was 6'4", armed, hunted, and almost out of time. But the footsteps that found him in the dark did not belong to a cop. They did not belong to the men who shot him. They belonged to an 8-year-old girl carrying a stolen red first aid box. Her name was Nora Ellis, and before that night, nobody had ever come back for her. On November 3rd, 1999, the wind outside Ridgecrest, California, moved across the desert like it was dragging chains. 20 miles from the nearest hospital, past the dry lake beds and half-dead Joshua trees, there was an old poultry farm the county had quietly turned into a foster placement. The sign at the gate still said Sun Valley Ranch. But nothing lived there except fear. The woman who ran it, Marlene Voss, understood the system perfectly. She knew which forms had to be signed. She knew which inspectors needed coffee and a clean hallway. She knew the state checks arrived whether the children got real dinners or canned soup stretched with water. Nora had learned another set of rules. Do not ask twice. Do not make eye contact when Marlene is drinking. Do not cry where anyone can hear. And if you need something, you steal it quietly, then put it back cleaner than you found it. That night, Nora was hiding in the feed shed behind the house. She had a blanket around her shoulders, a split lip from the afternoon, and a paperback dictionary she could barely see in the moonlight. The shed smelled like dust, mouse droppings, and old grain. To Nora, it smelled safe. Then the night tore open. A motorcycle came screaming off the county road, not riding so much as falling forward through the dark. One headlight swung over the desert in wild arcs. The engine coughed, caught, roared again. Then the front wheel hit the washout. The sound stopped so fast the silence felt wrong. Nora held her breath. Every lesson she had ever learned told her to stay hidden. Hidden children survived. Visible children got blamed. But a minute later, from the ditch beyond the shed, she heard a sound too human to ignore. A man was trying not to die. Nora opened the shed door. The wind shoved sand against her bare ankles as she crossed the yard. At first she saw only the bike. A black custom shovelhead laid sideways in the gravel, handlebars bent, one wheel still turning slowly. Then she saw the man. He was half on his side, half in the thorn brush, wearing heavy boots, torn denim, and a black leather cut darkened by blood. Across the back was a winged iron skull with a name Nora had heard whispered in gas stations and county fairs. Iron Saints MC, Victor Viols. The man was Caleb Mercer. But nobody on the road called him Caleb. They called him Bear. Bear Mercer was the sergeant-at-arms for the Iron Saints, a patched outlaw motorcycle club that made police officers stiffen and grown men step off sidewalks. Now his hand was pressed to his ribs, and blood was pumping between his fingers. 2 rounds had gone into him on the service road outside Kramer Junction. One had ripped through muscle and missed his liver by less than an inch. The second had opened a branch of an artery under his ribs. He had stayed on the bike for 14 miles because stopping meant being executed where he fell. Then the desert took the last of his strength. Nora stood over him, shaking. Marlene had always told the kids men like him were animals. But animals did not look like this. This man looked trapped, and Nora understood trapped. She turned and ran. The kitchen window had a broken latch. Nora knew how to lift it without making the frame complain. She slipped inside, climbed over the sink, and moved through the dark house without touching the squeaky boards. In the pantry, behind Marlene's canned peaches and cleaning powders, was a red metal first aid box. Nora took it. From the laundry room she stole 2 clean towels. From the bathroom she took a roll of gauze, medical tape, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and a pair of kitchen scissors with a cracked yellow handle. She was almost back through the window when one of the other Arfoster kids coughed in his sleep. Nora froze. No door opened. No floorboard groaned. She ran back into the night with the first aid box clutched against her chest. By the time she returned, Bear's eyes were closed. "No," Nora whispered. She dropped beside him, opened the box, and touched his shoulder. His hand shot up. He caught her wrist with the force of a steel trap. His eyes opened, bloodshot and wild, searching for the gunman who had come to finish him. Instead, he found a child in an oversized sweatshirt, dirt on her cheek and terror she refused to show. For 1 second neither of them moved. Then Nora said, very quietly, "You're leaking too fast." Bear blinked. "What?" "You're leaking," she said again, pointing at his side. "I can press it closed, but you have to let go." His grip loosened. "Kid," he rasped, "you need to run. I know how to run. Bad men are coming. I know how to hide, too." Nora tore open one towel and pressed it against the wound. Bear's entire body arched. "I'm sorry," she said, but she did not move her hands. "School nurse says pressure first. School nurse teach you gunshots?" "No." She leaned her small weight into the towel. "But I know what bleeding does." That answer reached him through the pain. Bear looked at her then, really looked. The sweatshirt collar had slipped down one shoulder. Under it he saw old finger bruises fading yellow and purple along her collarbone. He saw how small her wrists were. He saw the split at the corner of her mouth. His jaw tightened. "Who hit you?" Nora grabbed the roll of gauze and started wrapping it around his ribs. "Nobody." "Nobody's got a handprint?" "I fell." "Little bird," Bear whispered, his voice turning rougher. "I've been hit with pipes, chains, bottles, and fists. That ain't a fall." Nora's hands paused for half a second. Then she pulled the gauze tighter. "If I tell, it gets worse." That was the first time in years that Bear Mercer forgot about his own blood. Nora wrapped the towel tight against his side, fed the gauze around his back, and sealed it with half a roll of tape. She made him hold pressure. She made him keep talking. She even slapped his cheek once when his eyes started closing. "Stay here," she ordered. Bear almost laughed, but the laugh turned into a cough. "Bossy little thing. Stay awake. My brothers call me Bear. I didn't ask." "No," he said. "You saved my life. You get to know." Nora looked at him carefully. "I'm Nora." Bear reached inside his vest with shaking fingers and pulled out a heavy medallion on a black cord. It was not silver. It was dark iron, worn smooth at the edges, stamped with the winged skull of his club. He pressed it into her palm. "You hide this," he said. "If anybody wearing this patch ever sees it, they listen. You hear me?" Nora stared at the iron piece. "I can't keep things. You keep this. I get searched. Then hide it better." His voice was fading, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "I owe you a life, Nora Ellis. Iron Saints don't forget debt." In the distance, a pair of headlights moved along the county road. Bear saw them. So did Nora. His face changed. Go. But go now. Bear rolled to his knees with a sound that looked like it should have split him open. He could not lift the bike. He could barely stand. But there was an abandoned service station less than half a mile down the road, and he knew the payphone beside it had worked 2 months earlier. Nora watched him stagger into the dark, one hand pressed to the bandage she had made. Then she buried the bloody towel scraps behind the feed shed, wiped dust over the drag marks with her sleeve, and climbed back through the kitchen window before dawn. She put the iron medallion under a loose board beneath her mattress, and for 3 hours she believed the worst part was over. At 6:40 in the morning, Marlene Voss found the missing first aid box. She did not ask who was hurt. She did not ask why towels were gone. She stormed into the girl's room, grabbed Nora by the hair, and dragged her onto the floor. "You stealing for somebody?" Nora said nothing. Marlene slapped her hard enough to send her shoulder into the bed frame. "What did you take?" Nora tasted blood again. Still she said nothing, because under the floorboard a dark iron medallion waited where Marlene's hands had not found it. That made Marlene angrier. The punishment room was a root cellar under the back hall. It had concrete walls, no window, and a door with a bolt on the outside. Marlene told inspectors it was old storage. The children called it the hole. She shoved Nora down the steps. "Maybe the dark will teach you gratitude." The lock clicked. Nora sat on the concrete, hugging her knees. In the black, she reached into her sock. She had moved the medallion before Marlene found her. She held it so tightly its edges marked her palm. 23 miles away, the payphone outside an abandoned Union 76 station rang into the Iron Saints clubhouse. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then a man answered, and the desert changed direction. The Iron Saints clubhouse sat behind a chain-link fence in an industrial lot outside Victorville. By 7:30 that morning, the main room looked less like a bar and more like a field hospital. Bear lay across a pool table under a hanging beer light, teeth sunk into a leather belt, skin gray under the tattoos. A former Navy corpsman named Doc Rivas had both hands buried in the work of keeping him alive. "Hold him down," Doc snapped. 4 bikers leaned their weight across Bear's shoulders and legs. Doc cut the last strip of Nora's gauze away and stared at the pressure dressing. For a moment he said nothing. Then he looked up. "Who wrapped this?" Bear spat the belt out. "A kid." Doc frowned. "What kid?" 8 years old. Foster place off Sunvale Road. The clubhouse went quiet. Bear forced himself onto one elbow, and every man in the room saw what pain cost him. She stopped the bleed with a towel and tape, kept me awake, hid the evidence. She had bruises all over her. Doc kept sewing. The president of the Iron Saints stood at the end of the table, arms crossed. Roman Hale was not the biggest man in the room, but he was the one everyone watched before speaking. He had a shaved head, a gray beard cut close to the jaw, and a silence that made yelling unnecessary. Bear looked at him. She said if the woman found out, she'd put her in the dark. Roman's face did not move, but something colder entered his eyes. "Name?" Nora Ellis. You sure? She told me while she was holding my guts in. No one laughed. Bear reached for his vest, then remembered the medallion was gone. I gave her my road token. Roman unfolded his arms. That token was not jewelry. It meant a member was under club protection, or a debt had been sworn in front of the road. Bear had given it to a child. That made the child part of the ledger. Roman turned toward the door. Patch up who you can. Wake the rest. Doc looked up sharply. Bear can't ride. Bear swung his legs off the pool table. I can sit. You stand up. You tear stitches. Then stitch faster. Roman did not argue with him. He only said, we go clean. No cuts until we're close. No guns inside unless they show first. We pull the kid out breathing. We put the woman in cuffs if the law has enough spine to bring them. Then he looked at the room. And if the men who shot our brother are there, they leave with us. At the Sunvale house, Marlene Voss was on her second cup of coffee when the first truck arrived. It was a brown sedan with dust on the hood and 3 men inside. They were not police. They were not bikers. They were the cleanup crew sent by the Mesa Roja Syndicate, the same men who had hit Bear on the road and lost him in the dark. They had found the wrecked bike. They had found blood in the wash. And behind the feed shed, they had found one towel corner sticking out of the dirt. The man who entered first had a scar through one eyebrow and a suppressed pistol under his jacket. His name was Luis Ortega. He did not sit down. He did not introduce himself. He put the gun on Marlene's kitchen table and said, "Where is the biker?" Marlene went white. "I don't know any biker. Somebody in this house patched him up." "I don't know anything." Luis looked around the kitchen. The open pantry, the missing first aid box, the empty towel shelf. Then he smiled without warmth. "You run a house full of kids?" Marlene's eyes flicked toward the hallway. That was enough. "Which one?" Marlene's mouth opened. For one small, wretched second, she could have protected Nora. Instead, she pointed. "The little one, Nora. I locked her downstairs." Luis picked up the pistol. "Bring her up." Marlene led him down the hall. He reached for the cellar bolt. At first, it sounded like weather. The windows trembled. Dust lifted off the kitchen shelves. Luis stopped with his hand on the lock. The sound grew bigger, lower, impossible to mistake. Motorcycles. Not one, not 5, a road full of them. Marlene ran to the front window and pulled the curtain back. 42 motorcycles rolled through the open gate. 2 by 2, their headlights burning through the morning dust. Black vests appeared as the riders stopped in a half circle around the house. No one revved for show. No one shouted. That made it worse. Roman Hale stepped off the lead bike. Behind him came patched Iron Saints from Victorville, Barstow, San Bernardino, and 2 chartermen who had ridden in from the high desert with wet hair because they had not even stopped to dry from the shower. And in the passenger seat of a black pickup, pale and bandaged, sat Bear Mercer. Luis Ortega understood the situation a heartbeat too late. He lifted the gun. The front door came off its hinges. Iron Saints flooded the room in a rush of leather, denim, and controlled violence. Luis fired once into the ceiling before 3 men hit him at the same time. His gun skidded under the table. One partner tried to run through the laundry room and met 2 bikers coming in the back. The third dropped his weapon and put his hands up before anyone touched him. It was over in 12 seconds. Marlene stood frozen beside the hallway, breathing so fast she could not speak. Roman walked past her. "Where is the child?" No answer. Bear got out of the truck before anyone could stop him. Every step hurt. His bandage spotted red under his shirt. But when he crossed the porch, the men moved aside. He entered the hallway and saw the cellar door. The bolt was on the outside. Bear's face changed. He did not kick it the first time. He put one hand against the wood, as if measuring what was behind it. "Nora?" From below came a small voice. "Did they find you?" Bear closed his eyes. Then he raised his boot and drove it into the door. The door broke inward and crashed down the stairs. Dust rolled up from the black. Bear went down slowly, one hand on the wall, the other pressed to his ribs. At the bottom, Nora was curled beside a stack of rotting jars. Her face was swollen where Marlene had struck her. Her knees were drawn to her chest. But when she saw him, her hand opened. The dark iron medallion rested in her palm. "I hit it," she whispered. Bear dropped to one knee. The pain nearly put him on the floor. He did not care. "You did good, little bird. Are the bad men gone?" "Yes. Is Marlene mad?" Bear looked back up the stairs, where Roman's shadow filled the doorway. "No," he said softly. "Marlene is finished." Nora stared at him like she did not understand the word. Bear held out his arms. She hesitated only once. Then she climbed into them. When Bear carried Nora into the living room, the Iron Saints went silent. They were men who had laughed through broken noses, prison gates, road rash, and raids. But no one laughed at the sight of that child. Roman crouched in front of her. He did not touch her without permission. "Nora," he said, "my name is Roman. I need to ask you one thing." She held Bear's shirt in her fist. "Am I in trouble?" "No." That word alone almost broke her. Roman's voice stayed steady. "Did Marlene put you in that cellar?" Nora looked at the floor. "Sometimes." "Did she hit you?" Nora's lip trembled. Bear whispered, "Truth now, little bird." Nora nodded. "Once." Roman stood. "Marlene Voss," he said, turning toward the woman in the hall, "you are going to meet every part of the system you thought you learned how to fool." Marlene began to cry. "Please, I take care of children." Roman looked at the bruises on Nora's arms. "No," he said, "you store them." Within 20 minutes, the county sheriff arrived with 2 deputies and a Child Protective Services supervisor who had clearly been dragged out of a meeting. He walked into the house ready to lecture the bikers about procedure. Then he saw the cellar. He saw the bolt. He saw the mattress without sheets, the locked pantry, the records Marlene kept hidden in a flour tin, and the children who were too scared to speak until Nora did. By noon, Marlene Voss was in the back of a sheriff's car. By sunset, every child in the house had been removed, and Nora Ellis, wrapped in Bear Mercer's flannel shirt, sat on the steps of the Iron Saints clubhouse, eating a hot bowl of beef stew with both hands around the spoon like someone might take it away. Nobody did. The legal part took longer. It always does. The state tried to send Nora to another placement. Roman Hale's wife, Elise, refused to let the file disappear into another drawer. The club's attorney, a clean-shaven man named Miles Kavanaugh, who rode a vintage Indian and billed by the minute, spent 6 months turning every inspection failure, every medical report, every witness statement, and every photograph of that cellar into a wall the county could not climb over. The Iron Saints were not saints, not in the way churches meant it. They had records. They had enemies. They had 100 reasons the court should have kept them away from a child. But Elise Hale had a spotless background, a house with a real bedroom, and 42 men willing to sign sworn statements that Nora had saved a dying man before any adult had saved her. The judge called it an unusual custody arrangement. Nora called it home. She learned to sleep with a lamp on. She learned that food did not have to be hidden. She learned that when a door closed, it did not always lock. Bear recovered slowly. The bullet scars pulled when it rained. He walked crooked for nearly a year. But every Wednesday he took Nora to a diner outside town and let her order anything she wanted off the menu. The first time she ordered toast. Just toast. Bear leaned across the booth and said, "Little bird, you can rob this place blind with pancakes." So she did. Years moved. Nora grew taller. The bruises faded. The medallion stayed. At 16, she could tear down a carburetor faster than most prospects. At 18, she testified against Marlene Voss when the last appeal tried to soften the sentence. At 22, she rode her own black motorcycle down the same desert road where she had once carried a stolen first aid box through the wind. Bear rode beside her, older now, beard gone gray, scar under his ribs still tight in cold weather. At the old washout, Nora slowed. There was no marker there, no plaque. No official sign that anything important had ever happened in the dirt. Just scrub brush, tire tracks, and a piece of desert that had kept its mouth shut. Nora reached under her jacket and touched the dark iron medallion, resting against her heart. Bear looked over. "You all right?" Nora smiled. "For once," she said, "I know exactly where I am." The engines rolled on into the open desert. A man had been dying in the dirt. A child had been locked in the dark. One of them owed the other a life. The Iron Saints paid it back with 40.